Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 372 for the 6th of December 2015. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Just back from Newcastle, just up the coast, north of Sydney, where last night I went to a Maynard special night. Maynard, the Farce Awakens. Thank you to all the Skeptic Zone fans who turned up. We had a really great time. Maynard showed some weird and bizarre clips, including some snippets from the Star Wars Holiday Special. What an excellent production that is. And then we all enjoyed a special screening of the movie Spaceballs. Thanks, Maynard. That was a great night. And keep an eye out, folks. We'll see if we can get Maynard to do some more special events coming up. But what's coming up on this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone? We're going to kick off with an interview with an old friend of mine, the SkepDoc, Dr Harriet Hall. Now, Dr Harriet Hall has recently, just last week I think, put online via the James Randi Educational Foundation, their YouTube channel, a series of 10 lectures about science-based medicine. But as it happens, most of the lectures concentrate on the pitfalls and the shortcomings and sort of an analysis of many alternative therapies in order to give one a better understanding of what science-based medicine is. There are links coming up in the interview with Dr. Hall. And the best advice I can give you is after listening to the Skeptic Zone today, tonight, this evening, this morning, whenever you're listening to it, run to the internet and check out this series of lectures by Dr. Harriet Hall. More about that coming up at the top of the show. Following that, it's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson. This week, as part of her series into vaccine-preventable diseases, Heidi will tell us about meningococcal, a very serious disease indeed. Sadly, people still succumb to meningococcal every year. Heidi's going to be discussing what it is, some of the symptoms to keep an eye out for, and then she'll interview a survivor, somebody who went through the horrors of meningococcal and came out the other side. What an interesting interview it is, and what an interesting report all over. By Heidi Robertson. That's coming up a little bit later on in the show. Then we have a week in science from the Royal Institution of Australia, www.riaus.org.au, one of the leading scientific organisations in Australia. Then to round off the show, yes, it's Maynard at Sydney Skeptics in the pub, asking the big question, what should you get a skeptic for Christmas? What should you get a skeptic for Christmas? And thanks to Ross Bouch from the Brisbane Skeptic Society, who is down here in Sydney, gave us a talk at Sydney Skeptics in the pub. We're going to be hearing an interview with Ross on the next Skeptic Zone next week, so look out for that. But this week, Maynard chatting to various pubgoers about what they think a good Christmas present for skeptics might be. And don't forget, people in Sydney, Skeptics in the Pub, first Thursday of the month at the Crown Hotel, the corner of Goulburn and Elizabeth Streets. And yes, even in January, the first Thursday in January, we're going to have a Skeptics in the Pub. The best thing to do is to go to Meetup and check out the links there, or just turn up. 6 o'clock, first Thursday of the month. There'll always be some skeptics there. And we had some great times. This one with Ross giving a talk, which was fascinating. And afterwards, oh yes, the dreaded spoon bending came out, and people were, what's the terms? Half gobsmacked and half annoyed is usually what you get when you bend spoons. If you want to learn how to bend spoons, that's the place to go. But that's enough for me at the moment. I'm going to run downstairs, open the fridge. I'm going to have the classic soda water with ice for a nice, warm Sydney afternoon. That doesn't sound too bad at all. While I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And joining me now on the line from Washington State. Now, there's a state I'd like to visit one day. And if I'm visiting Washington State, I hope I can visit the home of the SkepDoc, Dr Harriet Hall, joining me now. Hello, Harriet.
Hello, Richard.
Hello. So nice to catch up with you. I'm always pleased when I think about you because I was the very first person to interview you for a podcast way back in 2007, I believe.
That's right. I was on that cruise to Alaska.
Yes, the amazing adventure, the amazing adventure north to Alaska with James Randi. You were there, Dr. Phil Plait was there, a host of other people. What a fun trip that was. And we sat down and we had a bit of a chat because I was very interested in what you did in your background. For the sake of our listeners, Harriet, can you tell our listeners of today, of 2015, a little bit about your background?
Well, I'm a medical doctor. I was a specialist in family practice, and I spent 20 years in the Air Force where I was a flight surgeon for part of my career. And I didn't start writing or investigating alternative medicine until after I was retired.
Wow, that's quite impressive to have that full career, then retire, then almost start a completely different career. And this is something that's very much held your interest for some time now, especially all the time I've known you. Now, you've been involved, and the reason we're really chatting today, you've been involved with a series of lectures which are up on the James Randi Educational Foundation's YouTube channel. And for those people wanting to have a look at that, just go to youtube.com/user/James Randi Foundation, one word, and you'll see those lectures come up. It's a series of 10 lectures, and it's interesting. It's an interesting angle you've taken. Really, the lectures are about science-based medicine, but as it turns out, most of the lectures cover alternative medicine. How does that work?
Well, I explained that in the first lecture. There's reason in my madness. For one thing, I think the best way to understand what science-based medicine is to understand what it isn't. If you think about it, if you don't understand things that are not good science, if you can't pick out the flaws in a study that's not good science, how could you ever be sure that something wasn't flawed, didn't have those flaws, and was good science? And the other reason is that a lot of the alternative medicine modalities claim that they're based on science, and they're not. And I wanted people to understand what's wrong with their claims.
That's a very good point, because especially a lot of the people I run into in the famous mind-body spirit or mind-body wallet festivals will claim that their modality, no matter how far-fetched and crazy it appears to us, they'll claim it's science, or it's emerging science, or it's something science has yet to catch up on. And this whole idea about has yet to be discovered by science is taken up by you in one of the lectures on something that galls me endlessly, which is energy medicine. Can you tell us something about energy medicine?
Well, it's based on a myth. They believe that there are energies that haven't been detected by science yet. But I just finished reading a wonderful book by Lisa Randall about how dark matter killed the dinosaurs. And we know that there's dark matter and dark energy out there in the universe, and we can measure it indirectly and understand things about it. And we can measure the energies of subatomic particles down to just infinitesimally small levels. And the idea that there's a human energy field that we just haven't been able to measure yet is just totally ridiculous as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, but it's amazing how strongly people will assume or believe or accept that there is this energy field. They'll simply accept that as part of everyday life. They'll build their health structure around it, and they'll build businesses around it. We have aura cameras, for example. We have people who think that they can wave their hands around other people to tune their energies and feel the vibrations and all this sort of thing. So I'm glad you've covered energy medicine. In fact, what I'll do now is I'll play a little clip from the very first lecture, which is you talking about all the lectures in the series. Let me play that now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Harriet Hall, also known as the SkepDoc,
and this is the first in a series of 10 lectures about science-based medicine. In this first lecture, I'll explain what science-based medicine is, why it's important, and how it's different from evidence-based medicine. In the second lecture, I'll talk about medicine that isn't based on science, complementary and alternative medicine, or CAM. In lectures 3 through 8, I'll cover individual topics in CAM that claim to be science-based but that are not: chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy, energy medicine, and miscellaneous others. In Lecture 9, I'll talk about some of the pitfalls in clinical research, why we can't take every published study at face value, and how to tell if a study is good science. And in the final lecture, I'll talk about how science-based medicine is misunderstood in the media and in politics. I've prepared a course guide to accompany these lectures. It summarizes the important information from each lecture and includes references and suggestions for further reading.
So there we are, folks. There are 10 lectures. 10 lectures, which is pretty impressive. They're all about half an hour, 35 minutes apiece, which is nice viewing. It's easy viewing. It doesn't demand too much of you to sit through one subject for hours on end. And I understand there are also study notes.
Yes, I put together a course guide. I tried to summarize the main points from each lecture and put some of the references and some suggestions for further reading.
I think that's wonderful, because I think this will be a very good introduction to students especially. Skeptics everywhere will definitely benefit. I'm benefiting out of watching this series. I've already started. I'm enjoying it immensely. It does a wonderful thing. Two wonderful things. One, it reminds me of things I've learned in the past and refreshes my memory. But also, I'm learning a lot, and which is a great thing, which is something we all should do. I bet you learned a lot when you were preparing these two.
I certainly did, and that's the best way to learn things, is to try to tell somebody else about them.
I suppose that's right. We learn all sorts of interesting things, like what's the difference between evidence-based medicine and science-based medicine. There's a good story about scurvy and vitamin C and how that was remedied using science and not magic, of course, and things like that. You talk about correlation not equaling causation. All the goodies, folks, all the good stuff's there. And as you heard Harriet discuss, there's homeopathy, there's acupuncture, there's all sorts of things. Now, that website again, folks, is www.youtube.com/user/James Randi Foundation. Or if you go to the show notes in this week's episode, I certainly will link to it there. And one of the other things that really caught my eye, Harriet, about this whole series is James Randi sort of joins you for every episode.
Yes, I have a James Randi doll that he signed to me, and it was on my bookcase, and so we decided to have a little fun with it, and we moved it around in different places from one lecture to the next. And in one of them, my husband suspended the doll upside down to commemorate those escapes that Randy did when he was put in a straitjacket and dangled from a helicopter and so forth.
I think that's fantastic. And just viewing the page at the moment, those lectures have only been online for a matter of days, I notice, but already they're racking up views in the thousands, and that's so encouraging. That is so encouraging. I'm so pleased to do it. I guess it was an interesting process to put those together. You were in your own home with a little camera set up. Did you have something like a teleprompter or an auto cue?
Well, we had kind of a jury-rigged setup. I had the text of everything I wanted to say in the notes section of my PowerPoint presentation. So we had that on a big computer screen in front of me, and we mounted the camera just above it so I could read my notes, and it looked like I was talking to the camera.
It works very well. I would have assumed watching it that you had a proper professional teleprompter rig set up, because you read the notes so well and you're still looking at the camera. I think that was very well done, Harriet. Very well done. Full marks for that.
Thank you.
So, folks, don't delay. This is a must for every skeptic out there interested in science-based medicine and all those alternative medicine practices Harriet covers. YouTube.com/user/James Randi Foundation. Thank you, Harriet. Thank you so much for spending time to talk to us on the Skeptic Zone. But really, thank you for taking the time to put this series together.
Well, thank you for helping me publicize it. I hope it gets the word out to a lot of people that need to hear that information.
But no, actually, and sincerely, I think it's great. It's a really good series, and I think it's going to be a valuable resource for years to come.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Hello, Richard and all the listeners of Skeptic Zone. My name is Ran Levy, and I'm the producer and co-host of Curious Mind. It's a podcast about science, technology, and history at www.cmpod.net. Each episode will bring you interesting stories from a wide range of subjects, from physics to astronomy and medicine, from arts to science fiction. We strive for the highest production values both in content and in delivery. We already have on the air episodes about German U-boats in the Second World War, about the history of X-rays and the war of currents between Tesla and Edison. Come and have a listen. www.cmpod.net.
It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Hi everyone, Heidi Robertson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters, coming to you today from the popular tourist destination of Crystal Castle in northern New South Wales. One day I will do a Skeptic Zone report on some of the items for sale here, but for today, I'm just enjoying the sunshine and the beautiful gardens. This report is another in my series of vaccine-preventable diseases. I'm going to talk about meningococcal disease and include an interview I did a few weeks ago with Marty Maybury, a survivor of meningococcal disease, who has a frightening and yet inspiring story to share. All references for the following information can be found on our website, www.nrbs.info. Firstly, some facts about the disease. Meningococcus is a bacteria, of which there are 13 main subtypes. In Australia, the most common types are B and C. Meningococcal can cause two broad types of very serious disease: meningitis and septicemia. Meningitis means infection primarily of the lining of the brain, and septicemia occurs when a bacterial infection enters the bloodstream. Meningitis can lead to septicemia, and septicemia can lead to meningitis, but often, especially early on in the infection, one type of disease is dominant. There are many other causes of meningitis and septicemia other than meningococcus, but this bacteria causes particularly dangerous versions of these diseases. Once infected, about 10 to 15% of otherwise fit and healthy young people will die, often within hours or days of becoming unwell. Of those that survive the disease, 20 to 30% end up permanently disabled, with lost limbs, hearing, sight, and/or permanent neurological dysfunction. Meningococcal disease is scary, and it is important to be vigilant for the signs of such a dangerous disease, as early treatment such as antibiotics can literally be the difference between life or death. In older children and adults, be alert for fever, possibly with cold hands and feet, vomiting, headache, neck stiffness, discomfort when looking at bright lights or photophobia, aching or sore muscles, painful or swollen joints, fitting, moaning, unintelligible speech, drowsiness and confusion, collapse, rash of red or purple pinprick spots or larger bruises. In babies, who obviously can't tell you that they have sore joints or headaches and neck stiffness, additional signs to watch for are refusing feeds or vomiting, irritability, fretfulness, grunting, moaning or whimpering, difficult to wake, floppy, a dislike of being handled, arching back and stiff neck. Not all of these symptoms may be present and they may appear in any order. So how contagious is it? Up to about 25% of the population live with the bacteria in the mucus of their respiratory tract without it causing disease. It is passed between individuals by exchange of respiratory fluids, for example, kissing, or by droplet spread, coughing and sneezing. Passage between individuals is more likely where groups of susceptible people crowd together, for example, childcare centres with babies and toddlers sharing toys and drink bottles or dummies, or in schools, on camps, universities and dorms, army barracks. And in some individuals it can then go on to cause devastating disease. In Australia, the vaccination schedule includes meningococcal C at 12 months of age. One dose of the Men-C vaccine is between 83 and 100% effective, and widespread vaccination programs have meant that the C strain is now much rarer than in the past, and the B strain has taken its place as the most prevalent here. A vaccine for the B strain, Bexsero, is available here on the private market, but not yet on the schedule. And now for Marty's story. Okay, I'm here with Marty. And Marty, first of all, thank you for having me in your home in the Northern Rivers. And thank you for talking to me on the Skeptic Zone.
No problems at all.
So, Marty, I believe you are Northern Rivers born and bred. You grew up in Byron Bay, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. So I grew up in Byron Bay and have been away a little bit, but yeah, spent most of my life here, definitely.
Okay, and when you were growing up, were you sort of aware of the low vaccination rates in the area? Was that a thing when you were growing up? Or
Not particularly. I didn't really have an awareness of it. I think it's probably been since coming back to the area that I've learnt more about it. But yeah, growing up I didn't really know much about that at all.
Yeah, it's funny. I and a few of my friends that live in the area as well, when we first moved here, not having grown up in the area, we also came to the area and not having any idea that the vaccination rates were so low, and it was only after having kids of our own and realising what the situation was. So when you're a teenager, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 2002, you contracted meningococcal. It was the B strain, wasn't it,
That's
that
right.
you contracted? Can you sort of share with us what the circumstances were that led up to you contracting the disease?
Sure, so I was actually in year 11 and I'd been on a school ski trip for a week down to south of Sydney to the snowfields, and had got back after quite a long kind of bus trip and was pretty run down and felt a bit unwell at school, headaches, sore joints. Went home, took a couple of Panadol and went to sleep and woke up very unwell the next morning. But it was really just after a big kind of a trip where it was a long week with not much sleep, we were all quite run down and all staying in close quarters in bunk beds in this accommodation at the Snow at the time.
Did anyone else on that trip come down with it? You
No.
have any idea what came about that you picked it up?
Not particularly. So no one else got sick on the trip. They were all treated with antibiotics afterwards, or when I fell ill. And the subtype that I got had not been identified in Australia yet. So, I mean, that's not to say that it wasn't there, but there wasn't really a clear, as is the case quite often, that you don't exactly know where it's come from or who's transmitted it to you. So
I think that the statistics are something like 1 in 4 or 5 people actually carry the bacteria in their throats and noses. Is that right? It just
Yeah.
doesn't cause usually any problems until when does it become a problem? If 1 in 5 people are carrying the bacteria around, when does it become a problem for themselves or others?
So a lot of people will... So, yeah, you're right. Between 10% and 20% of people can carry the bacteria in their nose and throat and be colonised, as they say, without, it ever causing a problem. And, it's quite a rare disease to contract. My understanding is that the people who are actually going to become unwell with it will actually get the disease quite quickly. They won't remain colonised for a period and then somehow fall ill. But you're right. I mean, there are a lot of people in the community carrying the bug in their nose and throat, but will never be affected by it.
And never know that they're carrying it either.
Exactly right.
Okay. Take us through the story from when you woke up very unwell the next morning. Did you feel yourself, were you aware at that point that there was something very serious going on, or did you still think it's a bit of a cold flu type thing?
I mean, I'd never heard of meningococcal, and I didn't have much awareness of infectious diseases or anything at the time. I woke up, and in hindsight, I was quite confused overnight with high fevers, and I woke up not knowing how serious it was at all, really, and so I was taken to Byron Bay Hospital and then quickly transferred to Lismore Base Hospital, and in their ED they kind of started treatment, and then I was actually induced into a coma and taken to ICU. And so this whole time I had no idea how unwell I was, and I had no one had said to me, you've got X chance of surviving or dying at all, because, I mean, they may have said it, but I was not comprehending what was happening particularly anyway, so it was all a bit of a kind of blur for me.
Yeah, and at that point, so you had all the sort of cold and flu symptoms and obviously disorientation and confusion, and that's when they diagnosed you and put you into the induced coma. So you wouldn't have been aware until you woke up, really, that you had meningococcal, is that right? Exactly
right. And so I had a huge rash all over my body that, you sometimes see pictures of this big purple rash. So, I mean, once you get to that point, it's very clear what the cause is, and ideally you pick it up before that. But you're correct, I didn't have any understanding of what had happened until I woke up a couple of weeks later, really, from that coma. Well, until they brought me out of that coma. And then they kind of told me what happened, and which was quite...
Wow, a couple of weeks. What actually happens in the body when the bacteria takes hold? You mentioned the purple rash, which I think it's one of the later stages of the disease, isn't it? So by the time you actually notice that rash, that's not one of the first symptoms that you see. What actually causes that rash? What's happening in the body to cause that rash?
You're exactly right. It's a late sign or a late thing that happens in the course of the disease. So as the bacteria enters the bloodstream, it will multiply incredibly quickly. And as a response to overwhelming infection, your body will basically, all the blood vessels in the periphery of your body will open up, and you will actually end up with a rash, which you're essentially bleeding into your skin, because the way the infection takes hold will actually use up a lot of the factors in your blood which allow it to clot, and so you will end up kind of bleeding into your tissues. And when you're in that late stage with that very widespread purple rash, it's quite a dire sign, and if you do come to hospital at that point, they say that your chances of survival are quite low, because you're exactly right, it's a very late part of the disease, and so the disease process is already kind of well and truly kicking.
It's well and truly throughout your body, and so that purple rash that we see under the skin in the pictures that we see is actually blood underneath the skin. I guess a tip for people as well is that it's a non-blanching rash, as in, I was always taught to the glass test, it was called. So can you explain what that's about?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. It's called a non-blanching rash, and basically it's a fancy way of saying that when you compress the skin, the rash won't disappear. So if you use a glass, which you can see through, and you compress over, or you put pressure over one of these small red areas, it will remain there, even with the pressure, whereas a lot of other rashes will disappear. And I mean, it's not one of those things that's absolutely, 100% to say that if the rash is a blanching rash, then you're in the clear. But it's a good one to kind of have in your mind as well.
Yeah, it's just another tool, I suppose. Exactly. Yeah. Tell me when you were in that induced coma, what were your parents told? What your chances of survival were?
Pretty low. So I think they went through a lot more than I did. I think when I was brought into hospital, everyone recognised that I was very unwell, and my parents were told, I believe, initially, maybe 5 to 10% chance of survival, and then when I had my legs amputated, I had other issues with bleeding, and so that again was a bit of a kind of scary period for them. But they went through probably 72 hours, 48 to 72 hours, where, it hadn't quite turned around yet, and they were still very unsure as to whether I would survive.
What a frightening time.
Yeah.
So both legs amputated. Did that happen whilst you were in the induced coma?
It did. So basically they brought me to ICU and stabilised my blood pressure and all those things that kind of just go haywire when you're very unwell. And as a consequence of the disease, my feet, the kind of tissue in my feet died. So they were trying to, save and protect as much of that as they could. But when it became clear that leaving them on was just going to, poison me effectively, I'm not sure of the exact timing, but it would have been in the first few days, I believe, that they made the decision to amputate my legs. And so I wasn't aware of that really until, although it's interesting, I actually had some awareness of what was going on during this coma, because it's you're sedated effectively. It's not as heavy as some general anaesthetic. So as funny as it sounds, I actually knew that had happened while I was in this coma, and I woke up, they kind of told me at that point, which I believe that I already kind of knew what had happened to some degree, which is pretty interesting.
Well, it sounds silly to say, but it would have been a huge process, a journey for you then to come to terms with that, and also the rehabilitation process as well.
Definitely. And so what I didn't know when I woke up, and what was a real shock, was how close I was to dying. So that 5 to 10% thing, I had no idea.
But you did recover very well, and I believe that 2010 was a particularly busy and successful year for you. Can you share with us what happened in 2010?
Certainly. So I had always been a skier before this had all happened, and I got involved in Paralympic sport after I had my feet amputated. So I'd been skiing from about 2003, 2004, and been to Torino Paralympic Games and then on to Vancouver Paralympic Games, and won a silver medal there in the downhill event, alpine skiing, and started medicine that year, started to study medicine, and also got married in 2010. So that was a busy year.
That was a big year. It must be difficult for you, not only on a professional level but a personal level, to have patients that refuse vaccination after what you have, the personal cost has been to you. Is there ever a time when you have shared your story with those patients, and have they been swayed at all by it?
A lot of the time it's amazing. People will completely turn around and say, you're right, I'd never thought of it like that, and then hopefully go out and vaccinate their children. Yeah,
so it's such an important thing for us all to have those conversations and make sure that the information out there is the correct information, and I guess to correct any misinformation we see on social media and in our circle of friends, and start getting the conversations going. Thank you, Marty, for your time and for having me in your home. We've had a few whippersnipper noises in the background and some birds, but you get that in the Northern Rivers.
You do.
So thank you very much for joining me, Marty. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
That's all from me for this week. You can find more information and get in touch with me at nrbs.info or at our Facebook page, Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters, or on Twitter at Heidi Howdy. But for now, I'm off to enjoy a piece of gluten-laden chocolate cake from the bakery. Till next time.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. It has been a weird year in science in 2015, and get ready to get freaky, because this is our Weird 5 of the year. At number 5 we have the tastiest study of the year, the science of how popcorn pops. The critical temperature is 180 degrees Celsius, when the internal pressure of the corn kernel reaches around 10 bar. The jump is caused by a leg of molten starch pushing against the surface under the kernel, and the sound is from the expulsion of pressurised gas. Bees love getting buzzed from caffeine. Caffeinated nectar, which some flowers produce, is preferred by bees, with them ignoring other non-caffeinated nectar, even when the caffeinated stuff is all used up. They are also more eager to tell the rest of the hive. In fact, they kind of act like they're a little bit hyperactive from the caffeine. Many humans like to have a bit of a tipple, and now it's been observed that some chimpanzees also like to get drunk. Chimps were seen to be climbing palm trees and drinking fermented alcoholic palm sap that the locals had been collecting from those trees. They even worked out a way to use leaves to scoop the drink. Afterwards, the chimps were seen to be acting in a drunken way. At number 2 is one that nobody believes. You sniff your hand after a handshake to detect the odour of the other person. The Israeli study used hidden cameras to find that people smell their hands twice as much after a handshake, but they're sneaky about it. It seems to be an unconscious movement to check out the other person's odour communication. Just trust me, you do it. And our weird science story of the year, people are surrounded by a unique microbial cloud. We're covered in bacteria, and every time we move, we shed some off our skin, creating a cloud that is thought to extend a few feet around us. It has also been found that this cloud is as unique as a fingerprint. People can actually be identified using the bacterial composition. That's our Weird 5 science stories from 2015. There's more information on the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Ben Lewis, and we'll catch you next week.
You told me that aliens really exist. You met them and swooned with elation.
Hi. Are you a skeptic living somewhere in Europe or simply interested in what like-minded people are up to in countries around here? I have good news for you. There is a new podcast out there with the aim of helping you connect with all those European skeptics. The ESP, European Skeptics Podcast, a bi-weekly show coming out on the 18th of November on SoundCloud, iTunes and Stitcher. Come and visit our website, theesp.eu, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and help us keep the project genuinely international and interactive. Let us provide you with a real ESP experience.
It's driving me crazy, guess which one of us is to see? You're driving me crazy, you're driving me crazy. I don't know how you can believe.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Of course, here at Skeptics the Pub, we always throw questions out to people that make them itch and make them scratch and make them look like they've been infected with the question virus. And tonight's question will be... What should you get a skeptic for Christmas? What is an ideal Christmas gift for a skeptic? Now, we're going to try and avoid any buzz marketing here or anything like that. I mentioned some people are probably going to promote Dick Smith, but we won't have that. He doesn't own the shop anymore anyway. So what should you get a skeptic for Christmas? Which was, I think, a song from My Fair Lady.
What would I give to a skeptic? Probably a box of handkerchiefs. That's always a good gift, isn't it? Yeah. A bit of tongue in cheek.
Look, and maybe some undies.
Maybe, yeah.
With days of the week written on them.
That's it. Yeah. That's.
Well, I'm Alex, and I've been listening to the Skeptic Zone for several months, and I like it a lot. And I think the ideal Christmas present for a psychic would be, for a skeptic, would be a psychic in a cage. Say Sally Morgan in a cage.
Oh, that'd certainly make the northern skeptics pretty happy in the UK.
I would imagine they would. They would, and they would have, they could make money selling tickets to go and see it.
and look, I ask everybody this. I'll just ask you quickly. What is that the favourite sort of woo you like to hate? That's psychics.
I'm not sure about that. I haven't got a favourite woo that I hate. Homeopathy comes pretty close to second, or maybe even top, and chiropractic is another one. All those ones that beat people up, and as a pretense for actually helping them get better, I think they're dreadful. They should be eradicated somehow. Somehow it should be stamped out.
Yeah. And actually, this is our first time person here along with the Skeptics in the Pub. What's the woo you like to rate? What's the one that really gets your goat?
Chiropractic.
Now, why is that?
I studied it quite in depth during my undergraduate degree and made a lot of enemies.
Is there any? There is a genuine chiropractic that is actually science-based. Isn't there a side of it that is science-based, or am I incorrect?
I wouldn't say science-based, more that they've drifted away from the real crazy sort of in that they don't quite go in for the whole everything is caused by imbalances in the spine. They're basically glorified physios.
And how did you find yourself at Skeptics in the Pub and listening to the Skeptic Zone?
Well, I listened to the Skeptic Zone back home after being recommended it at QEDCon a couple of years ago. And in fact that was recommended by Dr Brad.
Oh, okay, cool. He's quite a dreamy looking doctor, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a good laugh. And then, so now I've relocated to Sydney. And Skeptics in the Pub was my thing back home. So,
do you work in the science field?
I'm a radiographer, so I work in the medical field. So I'm a nerd, so that kind of.
You spend a lot of time running behind that screen, don't you?
Yeah. It's my spiritual home is behind the lead.
Now, is that the first thing you're taught as a radiologist? Is before you push the button, go behind the screen?
It's how not to trip over your own feet while you're doing it. Yeah.
and do you wear a little Geiger thing on you?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, a little dose counter. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's cool. And do you get really incensed when people think that there's actually radiation coming from the microwave oven, and they go, the microwave oven will kill me? And you go, it's not the same. It's not ionising.
It's to be honest, it's more the ones that come in worrying about the radiation from the X-ray, smelling of cigarette smoke. Those are the ones that really bug me the most.
Yeah, you have to hold back on giving the lecture.
Yeah.
Look, you're out puffing out there, and you're coming in here, and you're worried about, Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what are you hoping to see tonight here? Well, what do you think you're going to find in a Skeptics in the Pub? You've been to a few other ones around the place.
Well, I've literally just been told what the subject is, and I'm really, really interested because virology is something that I'm quite interested in. It's something I find quite intriguing and incredibly complex. So.
And why is that? Because it's very hard to defeat them, or they're a very interesting organism? What is it about them?
If you can remove yourself from the humanism aspect of people die from them, I find them very, very interesting organisms.
Wow.
But then there's also the aspect of what can we do to defeat these little bastards.
Wow. That's pretty cool. The question we are asking everybody this time around, because it's Christmas, is what would be a great Christmas present for a skeptic, you reckon?
World peace.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And so I can't say anything funny about that. You can't make jokes. Well, I hope you get what you want.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and enjoy the whole time. Okay, Ross, you've just heard that she said she wanted world peace for Christmas, so you're stuffed now, whatever answer you give, really. What do you think would be a perfect gift for a skeptic at Christmas?
Yeah, I've given it some thought, and I reckon if Sally Morgan accidentally left her microphone on backstage, that would be absolutely gold, in my opinion.
So what do you reckon? We'd hear her talking to the people that are her handlers and might be doing all the stuff behind?
It's possible she might give away some interesting facts about her performances. I think for legal reasons we'll have to leave it at that.
We might hear something as interesting as Can You Hear Me, Petey? That one.
That would obviously be the dream.
No matter what. And of course, Richard Saunders, who you heard at the beginning of the show, the guy who's running this whole operation here, this whole chicken outfit. Tell me, Captain Soap, what would you like for Christmas for the skeptic? What's a good Christmas gift for a skeptic?
I think every year that I get my Christmas gift when I think that each year that we're around, medical science progresses more and more, and it helps people like my mother and my sisters. It's pretty damn good.
And what area would you like to see progress a bit more? I mean, obviously you've been involved seeing a bit of palliative care lately, and of course there's laws that are around that in Australia and anything. Would you like to see any legal things changed in palliative care? I mean, I know that's a
tough question. I have to think about that for a lot longer. But I'm pleased that, and this is public knowledge now. So my sister is having a cancer issue at the moment. But if this happened to her 30 years ago, her outlook would be grim. Now the outlook is good. So, you know what? Onward, science and medicine.
And of course, you had a scare during the year, but you got through.
I did. I had a cancer scare of myself, but again, medical science to the rescue. And the latest report...
And me, I drove you home.
You did.
And the thing is, the most dangerous thing about the operation is getting to and from the hospital, and you've had me drive you idiot.
Thank you for driving me home, Maynard. Yes.
But, look, I was drunk the whole time. Frankly, I don't remember it, so I think if I don't remember it, never happened.
Next time I need help, Maynard, I'll be sure to give you a call.
You should have been worried when I had the martini glass in the waiting room. Look, as I said, we're at Skeptics at the Pub, and it's not very often we get someone coming along who not only is perhaps a first-time skeptic in the pub goer, but someone who's only been listening to the Skeptic Zone for a few episodes, just a couple of episodes. What's your name, sir?
Jamie.
Hey, good to have you here, Jamie. And what made you decide to come along to Skeptics in the Pub tonight?
I want to get more involved with the skeptical community here in Sydney. I recently moved to Sydney, and I've been listening to the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe for quite a while now. And then I recently started pushing through to other things and getting more involved online and that kind of thing. Next year I want to get more involved because I'm a design student.
Okay.
And next year I'm doing my honours year, and I want to get more involved with science education in the public. And we have to do quite a major project for that.
And what about you are a Skeptic Zone listener after the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, so I mean obviously we don't have the budget those guys have, and they've worked together a lot longer. What do you make of the show so far? And you can be honest here.
I really like the format, actually. It took me 1 or 2 episodes to kind of get used to it, because I was used to the more very kind of very formatted kind of show. But I really like the way how Richard brings all the different kind of people into the show, from different kind of
including myself from time to time.
From time to time, yes. Yes, I walked in here today, and the first verse I recognised is Richard's.
Oh yeah, he's out the front with the hat out and the guitar. Doing his Frank Sinatra ballads. Well done there, Richard. Well, look, have a good time, and I hope you enjoy yourself.
Thanks, man.
Look, hang on. Doctor Alert, I can sense with my psychic powers that there's someone here who spent a lot of time at a tertiary institution to get a degree. Who have we got?
It's Dr. Brad Mackay here.
And look, and of course he's from Australia's most embarrassing medical practices or something like that, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
Great show. I love the hidden camera work. Tell me, what do you think would be a great present to get a skeptic for Christmas?
I think the perfect gift would be something that you can see into the future, something like a crystal ball.
Or television?
That's an oddly shaped crystal ball.
That's true.
Yeah, those plasma sets are a little bit more like paper. Yeah.
Actually, personally, what are you hinting for this Christmas? What have you been hinting for people to get you? Have you been putting hints out?
I've wanted a 3-legged rabbit. Yeah. So somebody else can have the lucky rabbit's foot, and I'll just take the rest of it.
See, I can't even get a rabbit in Queensland. We're not allowed there.
That's right. Yeah, because you've got the skeptic-proof fence up there, haven't you?
Apparently. Yeah, it's so depressing because bunnies are the cutest, right? I mean, that's a genuinely known fact, peer-reviewed.
And also, you caused a bit of a furore earlier in the week when you were on ABC Radio around Australia. You were bad-mouthing the fact that memory has got water. Water's got memory.
I was just explaining the ludicrousness of it. So yeah, it was a fun time talking about alternative medicine, especially talking about wet cupping versus dry cupping.
And so, I always like it when a skeptic comes up against a regular crowd that hasn't encountered the sceptical thought before, and they ring in and they go, I'm taking some homeopathy. What do you think that will do? How do you go when you have someone who hasn't been exposed to any of the critical thinking about that? How do you approach it?
I found it quite interesting on the radio. We're having people calling in about all sorts of different alternative therapies. And I think my resounding thought at the end of it was, oh my God, people actually believe this. And they're often people are just very inquisitive, especially they'll ring up about air candling to ask if that really worked. And when I described it as a magic trick, everybody was sort of impressed with that. So, I think there's a lot of inquisitiveness. I think a lot of people who do believe in homeopathy don't really know what it's about. They think that there's an active ingredient there. They think that there's something that it's doing for them. And when you actually explain about water having memory and how it's diluted and how that's apparently meant to make it have more power, people often scratch their heads and go, I didn't really know what that was about at all.
And it's good to just take it easy with them, because if you take a confrontational approach or you maybe insult their intelligence, that's not the way to go, is it? No.
I certainly explained it in the most confusing way possible to make them realise how bizarre it was.
Okay. Now we've got Jessica singing. Hi, Jessica, how are you?
I'm extremely well, but I'm very hungry.
She's one of the shadowy puppet master elite of the skeptics, aren't you?
I'm happy to claim that particular honour. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, as one of the skeptical Illuminati, then what do you think would make a great Christmas present for a skeptic?
Oh, well, a 3-year gift subscription to our fabulous magazine, The Skeptic, which can be got in hard copy and digital version and or both.
Oh, and thinking of skeptics, if you did have a Christmas tree, what would be a skeptical decoration for the Christmas tree? I always go for the Shatmas, something to do with Shatner, picture of William Shatner with a Santa's hat on or something, but what do you reckon?
Star Wars, Doctor Who?
Doctor Who's
surely they've got Doctor Who Christmas ornaments. I think that's awesome.
Get a TARDIS for your tree easily.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's good then. Okay, and how do you normally spend Christmas Day? Do you spend it having... A lot of skeptics have a lot of arguments with the family on Christmas Day, don't they?
Oh, no, we just drink heavily.
Oh, okay.
We get together with the family and drink heavily. And on that note, I think every skeptic... Tim mentions drinking white wine in the sun reduces the most hardened skeptic and or atheist to a blubbering mess.
And if you can't...
I just love that song.
If you can't find that, my Christmas favourite is Clarence Carter, Backdoor Santa. Tom Jones also did a version of it, Backdoor Santa. It's a great track. It's true. Oh, look, she's going to be laughing till January. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Want to help support the Skeptic Zone and look pretty damn stylish while you're about it? Visit Mr. Cat's Origami Jewellery. Go to www.skepdiczone.tv and click the link, or simply Google Mr. Cat's Origami Jewellery, also on Facebook. Pendants, earrings and cufflinks. Support Mr. Cat. Support the Skeptic Zone. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and I must say a big thank you to the Skeptic Zone's voiceover man, Jim Wilshire. He's the man who says this.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Jim came up from Albury. He lives down near Albury. He drove up to visit me for my birthday, which was so nice of him. Really great to see him, and he gave me he gave me an interesting present, folks. He gave me well, I'll let you listen. A sonic screwdriver. Oh yes. Not just a sonic screwdriver, this is beautifully made. It's weighty, it's made out of real metal, and it's also a TV remote control. So, I can't wait to visit my nephews and nieces I won't tell them anything. I'll just sort of be sitting there and I'll whip out my sonic screwdriver and turn off the TV. Thank you, Jim. All right, you can turn off now. Go on. There we are. Powered it down. Thank you, Jim Wilshire. What a wonderful present. What a fun present for my birthday. Thank you so much. Coming up on next week's show, as mentioned before, an interview with Ross Bouch from the Brisbane Skeptic Society, and what a great job they do. Relatively new group. They hosted the Australian Skeptics Convention a month or two back, and there are more interviews still coming from that convention because Maynard, being Maynard, running around with his microphone, got lots of great interviews. And also, next week, I hope to have on the show representatives of the new podcast you heard about in the Skeptic Zone, the new European Skeptics podcast. So that might be very interesting. What for this week? This is Richard Saunders. I wonder if I can do this. I wonder if I get a TARDIS coming. No TARDIS? Oh well, better luck next time. Signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepdiczone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter @SkepticZone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.